Welcome to another story made by Oracle One. In the heart of a city where the towering glass buildings cast long shadows across the aging streets, Martin Blake had just moved into an old apartment on the third floor of a once grand building. The walls, though faded, held stories he could almost hear whispering in the silence. The air smelled faintly of dust and forgotten memories, and the crooked doorway seemed eager to swallow him into its embrace. Martin, a man in his mid-30s, a writer struggling with a block that had lasted months, hoped this change of scenery would spark his creativity. The apartment was modest, but what caught Martin's eye upon his first inspection was the large antique mirror hanging on the wall opposite the window. Its ornate frame, carved with twisting vines and strange, almost unnatural shapes, seemed old enough to have seen centuries pass. The glass itself was slightly cloudy with age, but Martin liked how it reflected the smoky light from the city at dusk. On the first night, as Martin settled in, he found himself drawn to the mirror more than he expected. He stood before it, observing his reflection, the tired eyes, the unshaven stubble, the slight slump of a man burdened by invisible weights. He reached a hand forward, and the image followed, perfectly synchronized, mimicking every movement. He smiled faintly. Perhaps it was merely a trick of the old glass, but the mirror seemed alive. Night grew deeper. The distant hum of cars and occasional footsteps outside faded into a quiet so oppressive that Martin found it unsettling. He moved to brush his teeth, the reflection copying his motions precisely. Then, when he paused to stare at himself, the reflection blinked. Once, just a flicker, and Martin flinched. Maybe it had been his imagination. He turned away, dismissing the unsettling feeling with a nervous laugh, and climbed into bed. But sleep evaded him. His mind churned with unfinished stories and the haunting sense that something watched beyond the glass. 2 nights later, Martin stood again before the mirror. The apartment was dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through sheer curtains. A biting wind rattled the window panes, and the silence was broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe somewhere deep in the walls. He raised a hand, and his reflection raised its own, mirroring perfectly. Then Martin spoke a casual greeting, "Hello." His reflection responded, mouth moving in perfect sync to form, "Hello," silently. Martin smiled but then blinked in disbelief when the reflection's lips continued moving, mouthing words that did not match his own voice. The mirror image was saying something different now. The words were slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly clear. "Help me." Martin's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. He leaned closer, eyes wide. The reflection's eyes looked right at him. Not in the mechanical mimicry of a mirror but with palpable desperation. "Help me," the reflection mouthed again, but this time the words were beyond the glass, and yet no sound escaped Martin's lips. Frozen, Martin reached out to touch the mirror, his fingertips barely brushing the cold surface. The reflection mirrored the movement but suddenly froze again, and with a jerk, its head tilted to the side. Then, a whisper echoed inside Martin's head, not heard by ears, but vibrating in his throat, compelling him to heed the unknown voice. He staggered back, knocking over a small lamp that flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness except for the faint light from the street. Hesitating, Martin reached for his phone and switched on the flashlight. The mirror stood before him like a portal to hell, distorting the faint light. The reflection was back to normal, mimicking him perfectly. Was it real or a figment of stress-haunted mind? He shook his head and forced himself to dismiss what he thought was an illusion. Days passed, and the nightly interaction with the mirror image became recurrent. Every night at exactly midnight, the reflection would stop mimicking and instead mouth words in eerie silence. "Help me, please, trap, danger." The messages were cryptic but insistent, sparking a fear in Martin decided to uncover the mirror's past. He combed through the dusty archives of the city's history in the local library. The building where he now lived was once a grand estate belonging to a man named Horace Whitmore, an antiquarian obsessed with the occult, known for his collection of rare artifacts. After his mysterious death, never quite explained, the estate was partitioned and gradually decayed. Several accounts mentioned strange occurrences centered around Horace's bedroom mirror. Servants reported seeing voices behind the glass, figures not belonging in the reflection. Some even disappeared without a trace after spending time near the mirror. Armed with this folklore, Martin returned to his apartment with a grim sense of urgency. The mirror was no ordinary relic, it was a conduit, a prison. But who or what was trapped inside? That night, Martin resolved to confront the mirror. When the clock's hands overlapped at midnight, the image faltered and froze. Then it moved its lips to utter, mouth wide, agonized, trapped. "Escape me." Suddenly, the reflected image reached out, pressing its hand hard against the glass from inside, fingertips white against the surface. Martin's skin pricked with cold. A voice, distorted and echoed, seeped into his mind. "Help me, trapped." Horace's curse, broken, shatter. The suggestion rang like a chime in a cathedral. The key to freedom was destruction. Fear warred with resolve. What if breaking the mirror unleashed something worse? But Martin had no choice. He fetched a heavy hammer sitting in the kitchen tool drawer, his grip trembling as the clock ticked relentlessly closer to midnight. As the mirror began to shift, the figure pleading for liberation, he raised the hammer and swung. The glass splintered with a sound like thunder breaking silence, shards cascading like icy rain onto the floor. For a moment, silence. Then the room filled with a suffocating cold, a shadow spilling from the broken mirror like black ink over the floor. Martin staggered backwards as tendrils of darkness writhed and morphed, taking the shape of a tall man with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. The reflection, no longer trapped, but free. "You freed me," the shadow whispered, voice grinding like gravel with a venomous edge. Martin's breath became shallow. The man, or what he was, stepped forward, no longer bound by glass but present in flesh and shadow. "You believe I am a victim," the shadow sneered. "But I am Horace Whitmore." Long ago, Horace had dabbled in forbidden rituals to attain eternal life, only to curse himself to an eternal prison behind the mirror's veil. And now, unbound, his hunger was not for freedom but for reclamation. Martin fled the apartment, heart pounding in his ears. Outside, the city night was indifferent, the hum of life continuing as if nothing had changed. But in the depths of that old apartment, where shards of mirror lay scattered like broken souls, the shadow watched and whispered promises of doom. Martin never returned to that place. The mirror's shards, however, found their way into other reflections, windows, photographs, screens, and Horace's shadow loomed there, waiting patiently. In every mirror, the wrong reflection waited, not just to mimic your movements but to mouth the words you dare not hear. For more stories, like and subscribe.